Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, where industry leaders share insights on innovation with a focus on reducing cost and improving security for federal technology. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcast.
Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator. Today we have Chirs Harr, Sales Director, U.S. Public Sector for a company called Hyperscience, Hyper Science, hyperscience.com. I met Chirs a couple months back and talked about his technology, and I think it has very specific application for the federal audience. I thought we'd get him on here and he could explain and at least give maybe our listeners a better idea of what hyperscience is and maybe bring up an old topic. And the old topic we're going to bring up is called OCR, Optical Character Recognition. Now, an old guy like me, I remember this guy named Ray Kurzweil years and years ago talking about this. Now, for a young guy like Chirs Harr, he has a whole different idea of OCR. So I thought we'd get the old guy and the young guy in the studio and talk this out, and so I think we can save our federal listeners some money or other. Chirs, can you tell us about your background, maybe a little thumbnail sketch of Hyperscience, and we'll jump into OCR.
Thanks for inviting me on the podcast. Since you launched it, I've been a long listener. I've enjoyed a lot of the episodes that you've released. Yeah, so I've been at Hyperscience for a little over 18 months, but the company's been around since 2014. We're headquartered in New York City, and we're actually a Series E-backed startup. And we've got just about 300 employees helping us deliver this technology called intelligent document processing to the global markets that we serve. I am on the U.S. federal team serving as a director here. You know, I think we've got a great opportunity in front of us to help the government really eliminate the time tax associated with paper-based processes. You know,
I assume that listeners know certain names, and there may be something listen to this and they go, "Oh, Kurzweil must be second baseman, for the Phillies or something." No, maybe you could tell us who the genius of Ray and what he came up with, and the legacy today, how it impacts the way we do business today.
Yeah, so Ray Kurzweil, kind of considered the godfather of OCR, or optical character recognition. Right. And that technology has been around for, 3 or 4 decades now at this point. And what that technology did very well was this process of digitization, right? Where people would take documents, forms, things that could be evidence for a claim, right? And they would scan that document and they'd run it through OCR, right? And that optical character recognition, would help extract some key pieces of metadata out so that you could maybe archive the document or make it more easy to retrieve. But as this process of digitization ballooned, people started to realize, all right, there's a little challenge here with this pesky thing called scale, right? So if you need to process, thousands of documents a day, right, you need a different tool to solve that problem.
Well, when we're talking about OCR and I'm taking notes and my little brain's kind of going, all 3 brain cells, I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, here's March, April 2023. What's going on? Well, there's something called taxes coming up. And everyone listening probably has a folder somewhere on their desk with their taxes 2022 on it. And they're trying to scurry around and get everything ready. And guess what? It's a big paper-based folder. That's why I bring this up at the beginning of the interview, because this whole idea of paper is not some old-fashioned topic from 1962. This is something that is important, and I think when you're looking at any federal agency, they have to consider what ways can they be more efficient, what can they reduce cost. I would think that all this paper float around, it's got to be one way to reduce cost, isn't it?
Absolutely. Going back to the Ray Kurzweil OCR topic, right? When you talk about scale, right? Tax season, you're not talking about tens or hundreds of documents a day, right? We're talking about millions. Okay. And so scale matters. So when you've got millions of documents flowing into your enterprise every single day, right? The concept of one person opening up every single document and doing a keyword search over that document becomes incredibly difficult. Trying to find out, right, what customer this is for, how much does the person owe, how much are they claiming, that becomes really difficult. So this concept of intelligent document processing is taking OCR to the next level to solve, using natural language processing and machine learning, to solve the context contained in all these documents, especially with tax returns, to help automate and accelerate, whatever business process this journey is. And I got to tell you, I hope I get my tax return or the adjudication of my return done more quickly this year than in years past. And from what I've seen out there, it looks like that might happen.
I have some friends coming in town from Alaska. We're going to go downtown and maybe see some museums and see what's going on downtown. And I can remember once I was downtown and I had an appointment to talk to the people at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. It's kind of like a museum. The building is like a museum when you walk by. It's like, wow. And the inside, the foyer is kind of real. Like, what is this, like the Smithsonian or something that's going on? And I just want to do a contrast here because they have something new. They come up with a study and they said, let's take a look at this paper stuff. Maybe it's costing you taxpayer, Chirs Harr, you taxpayer, John Gilroy, more than you think. Why don't you tell us about this study?
Yeah. So when the chamber released the study, our team, we got a kick out of it because first off, they conducted a fantastic report. But what the report highlights is exactly what our team has been focused on. And it's at the end of the day, right, making work more human by eliminating the time tax associated with document and data processing, really through human-centered automation, right? So in their report, they talk about how eliminating paper-based processes could save taxpayers approximately $40 billion annually.
I read that and I said, what are you talking about? With a B?
I know. It's mesmerizing, right? And they've done a tremendous job in the study. They've got all these artifacts and example use cases. And as we read through them, right, we recognize some of the use cases. And I got to tell you, it just makes me think about the market for intelligent document processing, right? Machine learning and natural language processing to help tackle this process of eliminating paper-based processes. And in fact, our top 4 agency clients, they're processing nearly a combined 800 million pages annually today through Hyperscience.
No, wait a minute. If I'm on Jeopardy and someone asked me that question, no way I'd guess that. Would you? 800 million? Nah, I don't believe that, Chris.
Yeah, when I was interviewing at Hyperscience, some of the anecdotes that were shared with me were impressive, right? It got my attention. And, I think we're at an interesting time, right? Where new technology brought on by natural language processing and machine learning, thanks in large part to advancements in other technologies, are helping solve these legacy business challenges, right? So I think this staggering number of $40 billion annually is pretty accurate. There might actually be more savings out there for the government and the taxpayer. Because I'm telling you, from our front row seat and really our position in the market, right, we've witnessed firsthand how agencies are addressing the topics in that study, as well as, John, they're addressing how to improve citizen experience, such as the Biden executive order on citizen experience, right, which calls out that paper-based processes take nearly 9 billion hours of agency time annually. We're seeing technology like ours being applied to solve these two challenges.
You just used the phrase natural language processing. And I've been around here or there a couple of times. And I remember this was a phrase that was popular like 15, 20 years ago. And it seems to come in and out of style. So what do you mean by natural language processing, especially with your technology?
Well, first off, when you and I were talking a couple of months back, I looked into kind of the history of natural language processing, right?
It's
and if
long.
you look at Google Trends.
Yeah, that's what I did.
If you look at Google Trends, and I suggest to your listeners, do this, right? Look at Google Trends for natural language processing, and you'll see the topic peaked in February of 2004.
I remember. I was there. Yes.
All right. And for 12 years, it essentially went into this dormant status. And interest really didn't come back until about 2017. And guess what? That's when Hyperscience really started taking off. That's when government agencies started contracting with Hyperscience to help them solve their challenges. And so our team anticipated this interest shift with natural language processing, right? And so what we've done, or what this means to us, is we've delivered custom models to our clients over the past couple of years. And, even just recently, right, we've released a new software update, which brings now all of our clients' text-based document processing in a single unified platform, right? So our clients and partners can now unlock valuable insights that were previously trapped in these unstructured documents, thanks to advanced text classification, unstructured extraction, and also data labeling technologies, right? And that's all powered by this thing called natural language processing.
I'm going to draw a parallel and get in real big trouble here. Early days of databases, they were relational. And what's happened, they've kind of changed over the years. And frequently today's modern databases may be more object-oriented, and maybe this is what's going on in some ways with OCR. Maybe in the early days, it was just textual, but now you have a point where you can actually pull out information that is classifiable. So you go from unstructured to structured. And so now you can take unstructured information and scan it in like you couldn't before. Is this a parallel here? Or am I off base?
So one area of opportunity, I think, for this type of technology is around data analytics, right? And even predictive analytics, right? So when you talk about databases, that's where my mind goes. And if you look at my background, I sold data center infrastructure, I sold big data analytics solutions. And here at Hyperscience, the data that we process sits in that data center. And a lot of times, customers that we're talking to, especially in the federal civilian marketplace, they're looking at, okay, how can I take all of this previously digitized data that's now going through this idea of digitalization, right? How can I take all of the data, all that unstructured data, and put it to use, right? How can I put in a usable schema?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the magic sauces, if you would, from Hyperscience, right? Because the data that's trapped in those old records, right? It's only usable if you know exactly what file to look for if you're using old OCR technology, right? And what we've done is we've now democratized machine learning using natural language processing to find that needle in the haystack, to put it into a usable schema, right? So that you can extract all of the key critical data out of your records that can be used for some broad agency use, right? Maybe it's mining data to develop additional machine learning models that can maybe predict, an FHA or VA mortgage, or maybe it's, to feed conditions-based maintenance, predictive analytic models as well for major airline carriers or even the DoD.
Yeah, I think at your website, I read this phrase this morning, unstructured extraction. That's what hit me with unstructured data. Unstructured extract. That's the tough part. I mean, if you have a name, address, phone number, street address, that's one thing, but some things are much more subtle than that.
Yeah, exactly. And, our team sees this as a major area of opportunity. And I'll tell you what, there are some federal agencies that see this as an opportunity as well. You've got the agencies that obviously focus on, protecting our borders and helping with immigration, for example, right? And some of those agencies, they've been in front of the Chambers study. They've been in front of the Biden executive order on citizen experience, where they've actually outlined in their strategic planning, and even with recent RFIs, how they're going to harness the power of machine learning and natural language processing, specifically through intelligent document processing. And so agencies that are looking to not only reduce their business backlogs, right, whether it be FOIA or even, citizenship or even tax processing, right, they should look at intelligent document processing, and a lot of them are, right, because they recognize their unstructured data can be accurately extracted and in most cases, right, automated very quickly.
Let's you kind of stumbled on executive order and talked about mentioned this U.S. cybersecurity strategy policy is coming up, and so because it's in the news, and if you're at an event and someone walk up to you and say, well, what does your scanning have to do with cybersecurity strategy? Maybe you can bring up 2 or 3 points here on how maybe something with supply chain or something, or how does it tie in?
So I appreciate that you called out supply chain, right? So I think it's the fifth pillar of this new cybersecurity policy actually discusses secure supply chains. And John, secure supply chains have been under the microscope for years. I think the first time I remember it really taking center stage was probably about exactly 10 years ago. You saw organizations like Carasoft, DLT, even Imix Group, now Arrow, right, looking at secure supply chains. And, agencies, they've been focused on how to ensure the goods that they're purchasing do not have malicious devices or code embedded in those systems. And by the way, part of that process comes with significant documentation. But now I see something else happening and some additional legislation coming down the road, John, and that is this idea of secure supply chain from a cybersecurity perspective, but also from a human rights perspective. And I'll tell you, Hyperscience just announced our brand new AI ethics steering committee, of which I'm the public sector representative on. And so we're taking this topic seriously, right? How can our machine learning and AI technology help support these types of topics? And I think the US government is doing a really good job at putting forth this legislation to give some direction to agencies so that they can protect our critical infrastructure and, secure our databases. But there's a really important piece here. And that is, again, they're largely document driven. And again, natural language processing can help effectively do that supply tracing.
And I think what people are more and more discussions I have with people about artificial intelligence and machine learning, it usually goes back to, well, where are you getting your information from? And really, is there a bias there? Or are your conclusions going to be fair? And I think this is a critique that many people have of this ChatGPT. It's like, well, there's some ethical problems here. And I never thought that, to tell you the truth, I never connected the dots between, that mass amount of information you have to pour into the machine to get machine learning out of it. And it's not all O's and ones. Maybe it starts off as paper documents, maybe there's some sensor information that was derived in a laboratory on paper and has to be scanned in. And that can bring a bias to artificial intelligence as well. So maybe that's where the ethical part fits in. Is that right?
Yeah. I love this conversation, right? So, you talk about ChatGPT, right? You go to the website, they're taking AI ethics seriously, just like we are. And when you think about, okay, how are we going to use tools to solve our business processes? One thing I think your listeners can consider about Hyperscience is that accuracy matters for the business processes that you're undertaking. And I think having the human and the machine teamed together to ensure accuracy of the data that's extracted that ultimately feeds your downstream business processes matters. And so the example that you use about some document in the lab going into a process that could affect downstream deliverables, right? The one thing I'm always going back to here is with human and machine teaming, you need to have a traceable, auditable record of who touched the data. And we built that into our platform, right? You can see if the machine extracted the data or if a human altered the data in any way. And so traceable data is really key as we think about AI ethics in practice in the field with our clients and partners.
There's a concept that I'm not real clear on, data labeling. What is that? Where does that fit in the discussion here?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of talk about data labeling these days. And that's because to feed a algorithm for machine learning purposes, you need good data in. And so data labeling is the practice of telling the machine what piece of data exists and where it is, right? Classifying it. Simple examples, it's the practice of teaching the machine that this image is a picture of a ball or a dog. With Hyperscience, it's the practice of saying this piece of data is the invoice number. This piece of data is the date the client was seen, right? This piece of data is the claimant's details on why they're submitting a claim, right? And so data labeling is a really serious practice if you want to have accurate, right, robust algorithms to help predict future processes. And so within Hyperscience, we've now released this idea of guided data labeling to accelerate the human's teaching and machines learning process within Hyperscience.
To tell you the truth, when we began the discussion, we talked about Ray Kurzweil. I don't know if you know how big those machines were, but back in the, they was about the size of a Chevy. These are just huge machines, and it's gotten smaller and smaller. And so the product that you have, is it a service? Is it part of a data center? I'm just trying to put my eyes on, that's a Hyperscience over there. I keep thinking of a big OCR scanner, you know?
Yeah, so, we talked a little bit about magic sauce earlier. I'll tell you, another thing that I think is magical about our software is that we're containerized, and all of the machine learning and natural language processing, right? All the magic that happens within our software happens within our client's enclave, right? So there's no third-party data call to tap into our full capabilities, right? There are other capabilities out there that might require a third-party data call, but we do not, right? Because of that container, we operate on Kubernetes and Docker. And so our deployments are on-prem. We've even got some DDIL TAC deployments, right? No cloud or internet connectivity at all. And then make no mistake, right? We have a SaaS offering We're partnered heavily with AWS. We've got some deployments in GovCloud today. So, John, at the end of the day, for people listening that are thinking, hey, how can I use natural language processing or machine learning, reducing these paper-based processes? We've got a deployment model that works for them because every model, right, has security at the front and center.
I'm just thinking of several agencies that may be interested in a on-premises solution. Not going to name any 3-letter agencies, but it could work. Great. Crystal ball time. We're not going to talk, no more 3-letter agency talk. Talk about crystal ball. So billions and billions. I mean, your job is to reduce the cost for taxpayers. I mean, 5 years from now, you think people are going to catch up on this, or is there going to have to be an instant? And what's going to motivate people to take this technology seriously?
Oh man, we just had our company kickoff, and we had a breakout where everybody was asked to predict the future, right?
Oh yeah,
in 5 years, right? What's going to happen? There were some fun ones about tax returns, right? Because everybody's looking at their tax documents right now. But look, I'll tell you, right, in 5 years, I think you're going to see the federal government actually taking the lead, getting out in front of the commercial sector in terms of adopting machine learning and intelligent document processing to digitalize their processes. What does that mean in terms of future reports coming out of organizations like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce? I think it'd be pretty neat for them to do kind of a retroactive look, right? How much money has been saved? I mean, just from one of our deployments that we've seen so far, once they go enterprise-wide, we're going to save them over 50,000 hours of time. And that's not even one of the larger use cases where, we're processing nearly 800 million pages annually. So I do think you're going to see the paper-based processes being eliminated, right? We're going to see people's tax returns being, processed more quickly, right? We're going to see backlogs for whatever the use case coming almost to a complete zero.
Chris, I'm trying to take this interview and kind of wrap it up with a bow. And I talked about doing my taxes earlier, and then you mentioned this phrase kind of casually, time tax. I said, wait a minute, this is all about taxes. It's not about nothing to do with the IRS. It's got to do with a time tax involved in handling paper documents. And so maybe that's the lesson of this, is that it's all about taxes, but nothing to do with those taxes that you send off every year. It's got to do with the amount of time it takes to process in many different federal agencies. It could be FEMA, it could be, my goodness, NIH, anyone out there. So they all have a certain amount of extra burden in handling these documents manually. It's got to be, maybe it is the billion number. It seems hard to believe. Well, let's find out. Well, we'll come back in 5 years and we'll get a big we'll have a big board, like amount of money saved in the last 5 years. No, number of hours saved. That's it, wouldn't it be?
There's the headline.
Yeah, the time tax saved in the last 5 years. Well, great. You've been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guest, Chirs Harr, Sales Director, U.S. Public Sector, Hyperscience.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for listening to the Federal Tech Podcast. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts.